All right. Welcome to today's typing class on Briahna Joy Gray. So we're going to start with our usual of reviewing the previous episode for a little bit and then getting into the various video clips and then our final guess after narrowing down on Briahna Joy Gray and then seeing who we're going to type next. So previously on this live informal typing show, we had Norman Finkelstein, and I'm currently sticking with the type that we saw, seeing INTP, TINE, and yeah, it seems very much an expert, a specialist. There is going to be a video clip today where Brianna is going to talk to Norman Finkelstein, so it'll be another good opportunity to see this type in action. But yeah, without further ado, let's continue with Briahna Joy Gray. So my first impression is that she might be some kind of INTJ or INFJ or some kind of intuitive type if she's not any of those. Here you got a bunch of these kick-ass INTJ, INFJ women who, kind of look or vibe like her, maybe not exactly look like. I think we don't really have enough people typed. But yeah, so these are, a couple of INFJs and Martha Beck and Lisa Bilyeu. And then you got INTJs, AOC, and Layla Hermosi. So yeah, we're just doing our best here and, got a little bit of the starting bias, at least for me. And we're just going to watch some video clips and see what we can get from Brianna. There's going to be 5 videos today, or 5, yeah. Anyway, yeah, one of them I'm splitting into 2 parts, but basically 5 videos. So in this first clip, we're going to be with Candace Owens here, who is basically, talking to Brianna after Briahna Joy Gray got fired for, speaking out against Israel on her some kind of news show, and then the corporate people didn't like what Brianna had to say, and they fired her. And now Candace is talking to her about that because Candace went through something similar, where she criticized, a foreign government, and in the United States, for some reason, people get punished for criticizing a foreign government. So they're just going to talk about that. But is this an observer issue or a decider issue? I'm already getting pulled in, so you can kind of tell. So we're going to watch a little bit of this, and then we're going to move on because we'll get it pretty quick.
They're a politician, an elected official, they would bring on people who seem to just be internet actors who would come on and instead of taking questions from Robbie and I in a professional kind of interview style of format, would very quickly try to personalize the issue and want to have an argument with me about whatever tweet that they had last seen of mine that they didn't like, which obviously puts me in a really tough position as a host who wants to be gracious and sort of moderate and not get into a back and forth with the guest. But the guests started increasingly coming on with this kind of ideology. So there were indicators like that. I got a message from on high that we were not allowed to interview Norm Finkelstein. I know you sat down with him for a really terrific interview that I watched and I thought was really well done. And the argument was that he was a Holocaust denier. Norm Finkelstein, as you're aware, is someone whose parents both survived the Holocaust and knows the horrors of the Holocaust much more intimately and personally than most people alive today. And the final straw was when we got an indication that this most recent guest, the sister of a hostage, wanted to come on. It was pitched to me specifically that she wanted to come on to talk to me, not to be interviewed by both myself and my co host, but that she wanted to talk to me. And to me, that was a clue that it was going to be another one of these interviews where a guest who has a really legitimate point of view, obviously, as someone who has been living in the limbo of not knowing whether or not someone she loves more than almost anyone else in the world is safe. That is a perspective we absolutely should have on the show. But I was worried that exactly what happened would happen and that she would turn this into a referendum on my own personal political views and try to play sort of both the position of a human being who's going through something really tough for whom we should all have compassion, but also someone who is advancing a political ideology and advancing very specific untruths on a news show that it's my job as a reporter and journalist to push back on and fact check in real time.
Yeah, and I can't think of anything, grosser than utilizing the victimhood, the true victimhood of your sister to advance a political ideology. That shouldn't be the case. And you are absolutely correct that there does seem to be this media environment where they are propagandizing. They're propagandizing because if you truly believe in free speech and you truly believe that the best idea wins, then you should have no problem sitting down and having a meaningful debate, right? So to call Norm Finkelstein a Holocaust denier when his parents survived the Holocaust it's absurd. It's so absurd. They don't want to.
Yeah, so not to let the clip keep going, but basically Candace is saying the right things here. Like no matter how much double deciding you're doing, when the single observation is off, when your freedom of speech is off, then no amount of double deciding or playing with the other person, interacting in a good-hearted way, no amount of that is ever going to solve anything. So that's why the observers sometimes are correct in having observer issues, and so we have them as observers, just being like, hey, is anyone else seeing this, that kind of thing. So in clip 2, we're going to look at Briahna bringing onto her podcast some specialist people. And why is she doing that? Is that because she herself is a specialist, or is she a generalist? So we're just going to see how she introduces the other people and then move into clip 2B right after that.
All right. Thanks for your patience, everyone. It is just an incredible honor to be once again facilitating a conversation between two of the most preeminent and respected scholars of Palestine, Israel, the region, and commentators on what is now 2 years of genocide in Gaza. Sorry, getting a little feedback from myself. Apologies for that. Norm Finkelstein and Muin Rabbani, thanks for coming back and joining us here on Bad Faith Podcast again.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Yep. So that was just to see how she's introducing someone and just seeing like where is she versus, these specialist type people. Yeah, I mean, anyone can introduce anyone, but we'll see with the next clip where she's kind of positioned from a generalist versus specialist perspective.
Become more left than him in my politics, as did so many others in this space. And I think Zoran has the same potential to have that radicalizing force. I was eating at a Palestinian restaurant earlier today. I was reading there in preparation for an upcoming episode, and I listened to this woman plop down next to me with her falafel sandwich, saying, "Oh, I'm so glad to be in a liberal city. It's so nice to be here. I'm such a liberal, and it's nice to be here." And, me as a leftist, I'm kind of bristling, like, ugh. You're at this Palestinian spot where lefties, not liberals. But then I had to remind myself there are people who consider themselves liberals who are being radicalized by the issue of Palestine, who don't know the jargon enough to refer to themselves not as a liberal in a way that makes us
and
cringe.
even centrists now.
Yes. Sorry, I'm going on and on. But do you see what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
why not? Why wouldn't he act boldly in this moment?
Listen, number one, Bernie did something spectacular in that election. He used every opportunity he had to call out the billionaire class, to call out Big Pharma, to call out Goldman Sachs by name. That, because Bernie's an old-fashioned socialist. I'm not saying I agree with all his politics, but he knows the tradition. The tradition is in his bones. We used to say, Communist Party runs candidates in an election. Everyone runs candidates in an election. But what we understood was running a candidate meant you use the election cycle to educate. And Bernie was doing that to the hilt. He introduced a totally new vocabulary to 95% of Americans, to go out every campaign and talk about the billionaire class, those crooks, Big Pharma, a bunch of crooks. There had never, I'm older than both of you by far, maybe by both of you combined. There was never in the campaign in the United States of America where on national television, never, where you heard language like that. It was unheard of in our country.
Not even Kamala?
Well, that's a good note to end that clip on. But basically, Norman Finkelstein, at least from my perspective, is playing the role of the consume and kind of taking things a bit slower than Briahna here, who is, calling out the nuance type situation where earlier in this clip, Briahna was saying the nuance between what is a liberal versus, what is a leftist person versus what is a centrist person. And so these nuances are difficult for generalizers to learn. So that's where Briahna is potentially, as a generalist, she's tripping up a little bit, or at least trying to communicate these nuances, because that is the burden that the generalists have, is that if there is nuance, then I'm going to have to communicate that. And, meanwhile, specialists, they just go deeper and deeper, no matter how much jargon or nuance they're navigating. And they're like, hey, you either catch up or I'm going to keep going deeper. So yeah, I'm seeing Briahna might be a little bit more blast, a little bit more on the generalist side, but it's too soon to tell in some ways. It's difficult to prove. So in the next clip, we're going to see Briahna at least just do an opening statement. So we're not actually going to hear that much from Charlie Kirk here, who did pass away. And I'm going to put a video in the description if you want to watch this. It's okay. It's a pretty good, interesting video if you have the stomach for that. But anyway, what we're going to see here is she's going to construct an opening statement on systemic racism. It's a very difficult thing to talk about. And let's see, how good of a communicator is she? This is what personality type can help us with, is that those of us who are kind of endowed with those attributes that make us better communicators, like Briahna might have that. And how is she able to communicate her ideas? We all have our own ways of communicating, and let's take a look at how she constructs her opening statement on this debate.
Welcome to another episode of Debate Night. We're joined by founder of Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk, and former press secretary to Bernie Sanders, journalist and co-host of Bad Faith podcast, Briahna Joy Gray. Tonight's topic is systemic racism in America. I'll start with you, Briahna. Can you start with your opening statements, please?
Sure. Well, thank you, Charlie, for the invitation. I'm glad to be here.
Accepting.
Look, there are a lot of things that people struggle with in this country every day. 40% of Americans, even before this pandemic and the economic crisis that has accompanied it, couldn't respond to a $400 emergency. If we think of what that means, and we think of all of the emergencies that can come up that exceed $400 in cost, whether it's making rent, whether it's a medical bill, whether it's bailing someone out of jail, you can imagine a lot of circumstances that are really life-changing if you can't come up with that $400. And I think I just wanted to start by saying that, because sometimes I think the conversations that we have, especially kind of in our professional context on the internet, where there's a lot of different incentives to talk about a lot of different things, sometimes miss the forest for the trees. And so why I think conversations about systemic racism are ultimately important is because it's one factor among the many, the tapestries of things that are causing people not to be able to fully maximize their ability in our society. And I think people across the political spectrum talk a lot about freedom. It's one of our founding ideals as Americans. But I think often we talk about the freedom to do what we want affirmatively, and not the freedoms from not, the restrictions that come when you aren't able to have your basic needs met, have your basic housing needs, basic food needs, basic education needs, the things that you need to succeed. And for some quadrant, some cohort of Americans, systemic racism has been a barrier. And we need to talk about systemic racism because in a lot of people's imaginations, racism exists as, a bad guy in a Klan's hood and these kind of stereotypes, very explicitly denying people service, explicitly denying people a right to use the bathroom, the kind of racism that we understand from the 1960s. What we understand exists today is the aftershocks of a lot of those systems that were in place, not just interpersonal racism that existed at the time, but also the laws on the books that had real effects in terms of how people were able to grow and aggregate wealth at that time, and which has implications for the generations that have come since. So if you think about someone like myself, who's a relatively young person whose parents were born before the Civil Rights era, were born in the Civil Rights era before civil rights were secured for Black Americans in this country. We're not talking about something long, long ago and far, far away. We're talking about laws in the books that prevented my relatives who served in wars from getting the same benefits in terms of low interest GI loans to buy property that other Americans, that white Americans got. And that has a trickle-down effect in terms of how much wealth has been amassed by my community as compared to others. And I think it's not about blaming people. It's not about hierarchies of oppression. It's just about understanding that this is how the world was, and snapping our fingers and getting rid of those prohibitive laws isn't going to change the effects of those prohibitive laws unless we do so affirmatively.
Thank you, Briahna. Can we move on to Charlie?
Yeah, I'll make it short. I don't think systemic racism exists. So the burden of proof's on you. There's racism, individual racist, it's disgusting, reprehensible. We'll agree on that. But the systems themselves are not racist. There's nothing that I can do that you can't do. You went to Harvard. It's pretty awesome. I didn't. So that's not a racist country. So yeah, the burden's on you to prove it.
Yep. Okay. Well, you see the difference there. How much is Charlie talking versus how much is Briahna talking? So I'm seeing a little bit of the extrovert, that's a good coin to look for in here. Extrovert versus introvert. I mean, it's not even that Charlie Kirk is introverted. It's that Briahna Joy Gray has a lot of the extroversion. And yeah, I mean, is it NI or is it just intuition? That's one thing to see. It's possible, but from what I'm trying to hint at here is that she is weaving together a lot of different possibilities, a lot of different things under a single concept or a few concepts, and putting them together and making it streamlined for a narrative on systemic racism itself. I think she did a pretty good job handling multiple inputs and trying to streamline that into one kind of central thesis. At least, whether you agree or not, it's how is someone using the functions? So that was just kind of, we have two more videos left, two more clips left. And basically, yeah, this one is going to be about extrovert versus introvert. And then after we're done with these two clips, we're going to get into the guessing. So yeah, let her cook. I think this one is going to be a little bit loaded. But I think we already have enough information. So I might stop the clip a little earlier, but yeah, we're trying to see, is this an extrovert or introvert? And I'll include everything in the description so that, people can follow up.
I think what I found disturbing about this part of the conversation is that my parents grew up in a red line neighborhood. My grandparents, no matter how much money they made, they were never able to get those loans from the banks to get out of those communities. And the way that my parents got out was when my dad joined the military. That's how my parents were able to get out of poverty. And I think that the framing, the way it was framed here, how many black banks, the black banks did this too. The reality, to the point that you were saying, is that most of the banks at that point in time that were around were white-owned banks, and they were the ones that were issuing those home loans. And so this one really got my blood boiling, because another part of this conversation that is mentioned is that, well, people who had higher income, they would be able to get the loans. That is false. And that's the other thing, is that when those neighborhoods were redlined, regardless of the household income, the banks were still not going to lend to those people. And those were Black neighborhoods. And so I think that a lot of people don't understand that, especially if they don't have that experience or they're just not knowledgeable about it. But I felt like the straw man, the argument that he was trying to make there in particular, was that, well, there were black banks too, so that means it was happening to everybody, and black banks also discriminated against.
It's so absurd, Sabby, it's so absurd that it's almost beneath both of us for even having to have the conversation. The idea, where does the wealth in banks come from? He's making some claim that in a miserated community, fresh out of slavery and Jim Crow, should have magical financing. Does he think that if you just take over, build a building and write the word bank on the front, that suddenly has the capacity to lend infinitely? That it just, the money falls out of the sky if you hang a sign that says bank and you're a black person? It's absurd. It's beyond absurd. And half the stuff that he said was I believe to be made up. You can't necessarily say so in the moment, but the idea that black banks, to the extent that there were 3 in the country, because how many are there even now? God knows how many there were in 1950. But the black banks were somehow discriminated against black people. What if it's a black bank? What does that even mean? What does that mean? It's a black bank. Okay, so you're saying there's a bank owned by black people that only lends to white people? Does that make sense to you, Charlie? Does that sound like a thing that existed? And there's white people that like to go to be serviced by that black bank that is probably not funded very much, because who's putting the money into the black bank? It's funded by black people that only serves. What are you even saying? Like, it doesn't make sense. And this is the kind of Gish Gallop BS that his debates that are being heralded by the Ezra Kleins of the world are chock full of. And here's another thing, another part of the interview. He accuses me of being obsessed with race. Yeah. Now, I want to be so clear. He should be having this conversation with any number of scholars who are experts on redlining, which I am.
Yep. Okay. So she definitely says a lot of interesting things here. But she's seeing the narrative. She's seeing the behind the scenes. She understands the context of what's going on here and how Charlie Kirk basically set her up in a lot of these, in that particular discussion, the debate that we just saw. I mean, there'll be a video link in the description, or you can look for it. But yeah, Briahna is, she is seeing the behind the scenes. She's seeing the NI, and she's wondering like, hey, why aren't you talking to the actual experts if you want to debate someone? And she's not referring to herself as an expert. So, I'm seeing that she may not be that specialist, but that's not exactly what we're looking for here. I'm seeing a lot of extrovertism, like she is able to take care of herself in the realm of public speaking. Like that's what extroverts can do. Like she doesn't need to be as much defended by someone else. She's able to speak up and speak for herself and defend herself verbally. And that's really good. And then also seeing the kind of intuition behind why things are happening. Why is Charlie Kirk talking to 18-year-olds at college campuses? Or why was he doing that versus talking to more competent people? And, the experts or whoever actually is looking to debate someone, But anyway, without getting too into that, it's just interesting to me that, when someone dies, they do get, canonized as Briahna saying here, and which type is willing to talk about, the dead person. This is shortly after Charlie Kirk died. And I find that intuitive people are more comfortable with death, because they're kind of thinking about the end a lot. That's how you're telling the future. That's what the intuition is about. I'm a censor, so I don't really, I'm not really going to talk about dead people that much if I can help it, or I'm going to be weird about it like I am right now. It feels weird to me to talk about Charlie Kirk, but intuitives, they're like, yeah, that person died. Let's talk about it. So that's, I guess is a point for intuition here as well. Maybe that's why I'm drawn to typing so many intuitive people, because they find it really comfortable to talk about a lot of things I don't feel comfortable talking about. But anyway, seeing intuition and extrovertism, we're not going to be able to prove all 11 coins, but the other coin I want to look for is this the TEFI axis or the FETI axis? And so let's see, this is going to be the last clip, and let's see how Briahna uses her decider functions to talk about, what the solution is. So she's going to talk about the solution to politics in the United States, which is a hard thing to talk about, but she will find a way.
These people who
have mixed politics. You know, Theo Von's funny.
Yeah.
And he's saying things that feel like it's like a release valve. Like you can say a little bit of this thing that's been on your mind that you can't say in polite company on the left. And he doesn't seem like really hateful or anything. You can just kind of have a chuckle and laugh and have an open conversation. Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
You know, we can just chat for 3 hours and not have to be so precise about what we say. And, you know.
I seem to remember a certain candidate he might have supported a few years back also. Yeah.
Right.
Huh.
Right. I think that's the problem. There's just not an outlet for that. And that's not to say that I, you know, personally validate or affirm every one of the beliefs that comes out of these spaces. But I think you have to be attendant to and not just try to ignore and press down the reality that people are seeking out. Jimmy Dore didn't just snap his fingers and create these people.
Yeah.
There are folks that are looking for a realigned sort of politics and to find all of that cluster of news and that cluster of approach to life in one spot.
That's why I keep digging on this issue, because I'm interested in this particular cohort you're describing and what the coalition that makes up this third party might be. How do you see these different groups coming together?
The libs are in the Democratic Party,
Right.
and that's where they're going to stay. The question is what happens to the Bernie coalition was never that.
No.
What is going to happen to them? If the options are Kamala Harris, who's lived up the wazoo, and they're already, sorry, I mean, they're already talking about her for 2028. There's, you know, Jonathan Chait are doing like, I'm not a corn cob, I'm not a corn cob. Like I was right the whole time. Actually, it was Tim Walz's fault for being too left. I mean, the cope that's happening.
If they do that, they deserve it.
All right. Yeah. I mean, we're going to stop that one right there. But it's interesting to see how she's talking about solutions. It's very difficult to tell, actually, between TE and FE. I mean, maybe you have a better idea for it. Leave a comment on the video if you have an idea whether Briahna has TE or FE. But she does, you know, maybe we'll let the clip play a little bit more. See if we can get something. What kind of solution is she talking about here? You know, that's what we're really trying to see. I'll let it play for a little bit more.
On these topics of political realignment and coalitions, what is the role of alternative media in this space?
So I don't think people should vote for Trump. And the reason is that to the extent that...
As an accelerationist.
As an accelerationist theory, yeah. To the extent that there is a media battle that's going to ensue, and you have to make the case for why Harris's loss should force folks to move left and embrace more left politics, voting for Donald Trump is not that. They're going to make the argument that Donald Trump is popular. We've got to rally around Donald Trump. The Democratic Party has to be more like Donald Trump to get those voters back. I mean, that's the ratchet effect that we've been seeing. Yeah. To me, the value of third parties is to create a landing pad. You need to create a political alternative that you can point to that says, if you wanted these votes, these are the politics you have to adopt. And staying at home creates too much of a void, right? Like people who just don't vote at all, they can be weaponized. Jonathan Chait can make whatever claim he wants to make that is convenient to him about what could have gotten them to the polls. Oh, it was sexism or racism with Kamala Harris. You know, they can make those arguments unless you have them voting, say, hypothetically, for Jill Stein, and then at very least you can't say that it was a sexism argument, right? Like there's a there.
Right.
I also think there's some practical realities to it, getting to 5% of the vote, getting federal matching funds, getting automatic.
Yeah, so you can get a hint for what her solution is there. And honestly, that helps a lot because this was one of the coins I'm very much unsure of. So definitely would love to hear what people think. You know, I'm using TE at least. So anyway, those were the 5 videos that we're looking at, and it's time to narrow down our guess. So what was I able to prove? I was only able to prove really a few coins there, at least through video clips. There are 11 total coins. So, yeah, let's see what we can get. So my first attempt at narrowing down, I went this way, but we may have already gotten rid of the type, you know, there's a possibility that she's a different type that isn't on here. But what I was seeing at first, at least, was observer, OI, intuition, and extrovert. Now, she might have OI, she might have OE. So the other alternative narrow down was this, because I'm seeing intuition, I'm seeing DI, like she's not asking for permission in order to speak. and I'm seeing observer and extrovert, right? So this I feel pretty good about. Now, going from here any further is where it feels kind of risky, at least from a typing perspective. Yeah. So anyway, what I narrowed down further is, hey, this is OI and DI, right? Organized and self above tribe. She's talking in her perspective. She's talking about her way of doing things, her way of seeing the world, her intuitions building on top of each other, her potentially thoughts that are building on each other, or her feelings are building on each other. One of these, right? So I'm seeing either NIFI or NITI. And yeah, even here, I'm not exactly sure. So we'll see in the next episode if I revise any of my guesses for her. But my initial guess is, or was, NIFI, sleep, blast, play, number 2, social type. That's double feminine as well. But just, this morning, I'm like, it could be a slightly different type. So another one I'm considering is a type like this, where it's NITI, number 1. So that's kind of like the range I'm working with, at least for my guesses. That's often what happens, is that the last couple coins are very difficult to ascertain. And so for today, my final guess is going to just be this double feminine NIFI, sleep, blast, play, number 2. It reminds me a little bit of, Zoran Mamdani. It reminds me a little bit of Dave, a little bit, female, feminine, double feminine. But we don't have that many people to learn from. There's not that many celebrities with this type, not a lot of female celebrities with this type that we know of. But it's good to see. It's good to get a vibe for what this kind of person would be like. I think the generalist coin is a very interesting one. I think it's very high powered, a little bit masculine. I would say the number 1s and number 2s can be a little bit masculine. Traditionally speaking. So it's aggressive. I mean, maybe masculine is not the best word, but they're going somewhere, they have a mission and all this. So that's my final guess for today. It's either NIFI or NITI, but today I'm sticking with NIFI. And yeah, and before I get into that, someone had a comment. Is do you do these live shows as demon work? Yes, you betcha. I do these live shows as demon work. It is tough to do everything and, prepare and present on multiple ideas and make a guess. You can see right now I'm uncomfortable guessing because you kind of have to put a stamp on your intuition, and I just want to wiggle out of it. So it's a great opportunity to do demon work or shadow work where I'm working on things that I'm not necessarily super confident in, but by doing more practice sessions, then you get more comfortable. And I encourage anyone to do whatever is difficult for them to, just slowly get better at whatever your weaknesses are. And it helps you get balanced out. So my next live typing in 2 weeks is going to be Sabby Sabs, or Sabrina Salvati, a political commentator. You saw her in one of the video clips, and she's a podcast host. It's nice to do it's nice to type people who feel authentic. I think she feels authentic to me. So many of the people we watch are kind of paid by corporations and all this. So it's nice to listen to someone speak who is actually authentic and meaning what they say. And yeah, that's just her podcast mic to show proof that it's a podcaster. I don't know. And then in 4 weeks, we're going to be typing Javier Bardem. So that's it. And this is just another slide of that. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe and leave a comment.